YouTube is known for having many famous pairings. From Red and Link to Ian and Anthony, the dynamic of partnerships runs deep in this website's history. And in the gaming realm, none is more iconic than John and Aaron of GameGrumps.
Hey, I'm Grumps. I'm not so Grump. And we're the GameGrumps.
But just as these dynamics lead to a channel's success, so too can it lead to a falling out. In the case of the Grumps, after John's abrupt departure in 2013, the business needed a replacement, which they found in a man named Dan. Today I wanted to focus a bit more on the story of the person who took over John's throne, became popular in his own right, before being caught up in controversy including allegations of drinking, abuse, and lies. Well, I suppose not drinking in this case, but anyway, let's just get started with the video. Lee Daniel Avidan, who usually just goes by Dan, was born in 1976 in New Jersey. The son of an American woman, Deborah, and an Israeli man, Avi, by all accounts he had a very happy and supportive childhood. Yes, the father's name is Avi and the son's name is Dan, and their last name is Avidan. Just go with it. Dan's love of music started at a young age, and he has cited singing at his bar mitzvah in Israel as one of the major sparks to that flame. Even though music was his biggest passion, he still decided it would be best to go to college and get a proper degree in advertising, figuring that it would be the best compromise between using his creative energy while also providing a solid career path. He joined a 6-man group known as the Northern Hues after graduating, and Dan moved to Philadelphia in 2002 in order to join them.
There were lots of varied degrees of talent in the band, you know, and there was friction in the personalities and stuff like that. And that was exhausting because I had to play like peacekeeper a lot, and, like all these weird politics and stuff.
After the dissolution of Northern Hues, Dan moved to New York and started a new band called Skyhill. This was just a duo, and he found it much easier to work within a group of this size rather than a massive ensemble in which he was in charge of navigating the various personalities. Even still, Skyhill also eventually broke up when his partner didn't see the potential for growth. This left Dan once again directionless, but this time decided to take a break to try to discover himself. He took classes with New York comedy groups such as the Upright Citizens Brigade, since making people laugh was another passion of his. It was also around this time that musical comedy acts such as Tenacious D, Flight of the Conchords, and The Lonely Island began popping up, inspiring Dan to follow in their footsteps and combine his two greatest loves. This was also when he was introduced to a man named Brian Wecht through a mutual friend. Brian was a theoretical physicist who had gone into music and comedy on a whim while working on his PhD. The two quickly hit it off and formed a new band, Ninja Sex Party. They decided to adopt fictional personas in order to sell the joke of their group. Dan, who provided the vocals, would become Danny Sexbang, a sex-obsessed man-child whose primary focus was partying and sleeping with women. Brian, who performed on keyboard, became Ninja Brian, a masked man who never spoke, was constantly murdering people, and openly despised his bandmate.
Brian's a ninja, Danny's a hot Jew, and we are best friends. Yeah, we are best friends, it's true.
They began releasing their work as singles on YouTube, with their first upload being the music video for their song I Just Want to Dance on November 22nd, 2009. NSP came out strong right from the offsets, with their characters being simple yet well-defined, and their sound basically fully formed to how it would stay for years. They eventually made enough songs to put together a full album titled NSFW in 2011. Their second, and in my opinion best work, Strawberries and Cream, came out a couple years later. This release included what I and many others consider to be their magnum opus, FYI, I Wanna F Your A.
I want my P in your V, want you to S on my T's, then FYI, I wanna F your A.
As they continued making music, NSP started growing a small but loyal following. This niche fame started opening doors that they had never experienced before, such as when Dan was hired as a short-lived host for the raunchy cartoon shorts made by the studio Mondo Media.
Hi, I'm Dan Avidan. You may know me from my comedy band Ninja Sex Party. We're extremely famous and popular with my mom. And I have it on good authority that we're pretty popular with your mom too. I'm saying we had sex with your mom.
Dan turned out to be incredibly unpopular with Mondo's viewers who were only coming to the channel to see the cartoons, and they were very vocal about their annoyance.
If something is established and you are just suddenly there as a new thing, There's going to be some stormy waters to get through.
One of Ninja Sex Party's early fans was an animator named Ross O'Donovan, who began telling all of his friends about them. This included a fellow cartoonist by the name of Aaron Hansen, aka Egoraptor, who instantly fell in love. He reached out to Dan and Brian, who at the time only had about 1,000 subscribers, and asked if they'd ever like to collaborate. This was during a period of time in which Brian had moved to London in order to take a job as a professor, leaving the long-term status of NSP in limbo. While the potential loss of yet another band certainly hurt Dan deeply, this time around there was a clear new path laid out for him to follow. And he went out to Los Angeles in 2011 in order to hang out with Aaron. The two had a natural chemistry, and Egoraptor would go on to direct multiple NSP music videos and provide the animation for their song A Dinosaur Laser Fight. On July 18, 2012, Aaron started a new channel with his friend John Jafari, aka Jontron, called GameGrumps. The format was simple, as the two men simply played video games while yelling and joking around with each other. This was around the time that this style of Let's Play content was really taking off in popularity, and the account quickly exploded. Viewers loved Aaron and John's chaotic dynamic, and they soon became the pinnacle of the two friends playing video games genre.
Where are you going? I'm sorry. I got frustrated.
John also took part in some NSP-related projects, such as when he was featured in the music video for their song Let's Get This Terrible Party Started, which was directed by Aaron. Despite the meteoric rise of GameGrumps, fans were shocked when it was abruptly announced just a year later in June of 2013 that he would be stepping away from the show. This was done with an incredibly strange video titled Ode to John, in which Jafari explained his reasons for leaving in segments filmed completely separately from the rest of the Grumps. The bizarre nature of this announcement has spawned countless conspiracy theories about what might have been going on behind the scenes. We don't have time to get into it here, but I may or may not have already done a video about the conspiracies involving drinking abuse and lies surrounding the exit. Ode to John concluded with the reveal that Dan Avidan would be taking over as the new co-host of GameGrumps, as well as premiering another series on the channel called Steam Train alongside Ross O'Donovan. Right off the bat, he was fighting an uphill battle. As can probably be expected, fans were not exactly thrilled to see this new face for their favorite show. Of course, the mysteries surrounding John's exit didn't help anything either. Despite the backlash, the Grumps kept their hands down and continued uploading videos as normal. Dan's experience with Mondo Media had clearly taught him a few lessons about dealing with angry viewers. Rather than attempting to recreate the same dynamic that Aaron and John had, Dan instead decided to lean into his own personal strengths. For years at that point, his public image had been completely defined by the loud and immature Danny Sexbang persona, and this was a good opportunity to show the world his true self. On GameGrumps, Dan was soft-spoken, laid back, and constantly positive, which turned out to be the perfect counterbalance to Aaron's hot-temperedness. If John brought chaos to the show, Dan was the new yin to Aaron's yang, and viewers soon found themselves warming up to him. One of the ways Dan endeared himself to the Grumps audience early on was by being extremely open about his personal struggles. In a video uploaded in November of 2013, he talked about his experience with OCD and depression, and how he learned to overcome them after years of struggle.
And I had this big, maybe this is dramatic, overly dramatic to say, but it is what happened. There was this really pretty lake in the middle of the town I was staying in, and I was on Prozac for I guess 6 months, and then while I was out there, I was I don't need this shit anymore. This shit is, I just feel good, and I'm done. And so I took.
Did you throw it?
I did.
Nice.
I took the pill bottle and threw it into the lake.
Yes.
Yeah, it was one of the most satisfying personal moments, I guess.
That's super cool.
Some called out this story as you shouldn't quit cold turkey off of SSRIs, as it can be extremely dangerous. Despite this, the vast majority of viewers praised him for his honesty. This sort of thing became a staple of Dan's image on GameGrumps, a friendly face whose positive attitude will always comfort you when you're down. This created a rift between the old fans of the channel who liked the more edgy humor from the John era, and the new viewers being curated who liked the more advertiser-friendly approach. The new attention from GameGrumps had the additional effect of bringing thousands of viewers to Ninja Sex Party.
It was just a night and day. It was like someone flipped a switch, and I was just like, oh my God, all right, it's all happening now.
This sudden boost in engagement meant that music was now a viable career path rather than just a fun side project for the group. This is what finally made Brian decide to move to LA permanently with his wife Rachel and their newborn daughter Audrey. It was also during this time that he, Dan, and Aaron started a new band called Starbomb, which had actually been in the works for a while. The group, whose songs consist entirely of video game parodies, released their first self-titled album in December of 2013. While they haven't been quite as active as NSP, they've still managed to release a steady flow of music over the years. By his own admission, Dan mostly worked as talent for GameGrumps and had very little involvement in day-to-day business operations. His time with the Northern Hues taught him that he wasn't cut out for management. This ended up being the perfect arrangement for him. He could make a steady income by co-hosting the show while using the rest of his time to work on his music, funneling his new GameGrumps audience toward Ninja Sex Party in the process. Following the release of their third album, Attitude City, in 2015, Dan and Brian made two new acquaintances that changed the course of their careers forever. One, they met a band called Tupperware Remix Party, who provided backup music for a new NSP and Starbomb song, both on albums and at live shows, filling out the sound beyond just Dan's vocals and Brian's keyboard. And two, they began working with a producer named Jim Roach, who was able to bring the duo up to the next level.
The word revolutionize is coming to my mind, but that's not exactly the word, but he opened up a whole new world to us because he actually knew how to produce songs, in a way that is very, very helpful. So like our early goal was to just make people laugh no matter what, just an extra soundboard, like an impartial third party.
With this elevation of his craft, it seemed as though Dan was getting antsy about the state of his career. He loved making people laugh, but that had not been his initial goal with music when he was at his old bands. Some part of him still wanted to make genuine art outside of the immature comedy that he had been known for. This urge led to his cover of the song The Last Unicorn in 2015, eventually turning into a full cover album the following year titled Under the Covers. As of writing, NSP has released a total of 4 albums in this series. But recording the works of other artists clearly wasn't enough for Dan. As part of the band's 4th album, Cool Patrol in 2018, nestled amongst the goofy comedy music was a song called Danny Don't You Know, a ballad in which the singer reassures his younger self about the man he would eventually grow up to be. This track still had jokes sprinkled throughout, but it was largely intended to be Ninja Sex Party's first sincere piece. The music video also featured the Stranger Things star Finn Wolfhard playing the role of a young Danny, as he had been a longtime fan of GameGrumps and the channels in their surrounding orbit. While some were put off by the tonal shift compared to the other songs on the album, the goodwill Dan had accumulated from his time on GameGrumps meant that many were eager to hear some of his more heartfelt work. Danny Don't You Know ended up being the catalyst to one of Ninja Sex Party's biggest breaks into the mainstream, as they were booked to perform it on Conan O'Brien's TBS show. Yes, the star of Ninja Sex Party had risen significantly in the years since Dan became a Game Grump. At this point, it appeared that the co-host had long since eclipsed Jontron's time on the show, and for thousands of viewers, he was the only not-so-grump that they cared about. Still, fans from the early days buzzed around the comments section requesting Jafari's return. Aaron and Dan largely ignored this small but vocal group. After all, they had a good thing going with just the two of them, so why dredge up the past? But this silence only inflamed the conspiracy theories about a potential falling out between John and Aaron. With the lack of any real information coming from either side, people felt compelled to look into the tiniest details whenever they could, including an infamous 4chan thread which claimed John hit Aaron's wife Susie. During 2014's MagFest gaming convention, Jontron and GameGrumps both had panels scheduled for different times in the same room. John went first, and during his presentation, a fan walked up and gave him a box of cheese nips. Later, during the Grumps panel, Dan noticed that the snacks had been left in the room and decided to help himself.
Are these someone else's nips? How does it taste, nip?
Now, from an outsider's perspective, this may seem like a completely inconsequential moment. But for GameGrumps schizo-conspiracy theorists, it meant everything. The fact that the crowd was screaming Jontron's name, but neither Dan nor Aaron seemed to acknowledge it, confirmed to this fringe group that there was a concerted effort behind the scenes to erase Jafari from the history of GameGrumps. It certainly didn't help that Dan had gleefully eaten the cheese nips even after being told who they belonged to. It probably goes without saying that the vast majority of onlookers did not see this incident in the way that the hardcore theorists did. Still, it indicated that there was an unrest in the fan base that would be wise to address in some capacity. In an episode of GameGrumps uploaded February 9th, 2015, the duo finally made their first reference to John since his departure.
What's up, Johnny boy? We love you, girl.
Hey, baby.
How you doing?
Give me a kiss.
Give me some of your sweet sexy.
Hey, stop.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got it. Yeah, I got carried away
That's
there.
for me.
Throughout the rest of the year, the Grumps would make even more John mentions. This included a direct reference to the infamous cheese nips incident, in which Dan took a direct shot at the conspiracies that had been flying around.
The John's cheese nips controversy.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? That was like, I don't know. I never got upset at anyone, and people were like, like everyone's going crazy, and I don't know why. But like when you're up there, you can't make out what people are saying. Like you can hear one voice, but when everyone's yelling at once, it just sounds like this garbled mess.
Yeah.
So like everybody's like, those are John's! And I'm like, what? Who?
This all culminated in December of 2015 when Aaron made a surprise appearance at the end of John's Starcade video series, marking the first time the two had collaborated since the split. For the most part, this put any speculation about a behind-the-scenes feud to bed. Sure, the conspiracy theories persisted, but they were largely viewed as a fringe outlier. But that all changed in 2017, when John decided to partake in a live debate with the left-wing Twitch streamer Destiny. The entire thing was largely viewed as a disaster, with Jafari clearly being unprepared, but one moment stuck out and continues to live in infamy.
So, do you think that poor blacks probably commit more crime relative to wealthier black people?
They do. Wealthy blacks also commit more crime than poor whites. That's a fact.
Wait, what?
Jafari's politics had been publicly sliding to the right for years, and many conspiracy theorists believe this to be a factor in his falling out with Aaron. This stream did a lot of short-term damage to John's career, and pretty much destroyed any chance of him returning to the now corporate-friendly GameGrumps channel in any capacity. During a convention later that year, Dan and Aaron commented on the situation when asked if John would ever make a guest appearance on the show.
Questionable if he'll be on the show on Guest Grumps due to recent things that have been said.
Yeah, very questionable. It was always kind of maybe yes, maybe no. Because of that, like, it's probably a lot closer to no. But that's not our fault.
This was a massive blow to old-school GameGrumps fans. The thing is, though, this was no longer the primary audience for the channel. Dan had been the co-host for significantly longer than John had, and over time he had accumulated his own fan base who greatly preferred his more mellow style of commentary. All he and Aaron had to do was keep their heads down, avoid the same controversial pitfalls John had, and continue to please this new audience. Unfortunately for them, a storm was on the horizon that threatened everything they had been building. It all started in November of 2019, when an ex-employee and friend of Ninja Sex Party and GameGrumps named Katie Schwartz uploaded a video of a play she wrote titled Bad People. This was a semi-autobiographical work about all the bad relationships she had been a part of throughout her life, with the names of real people changed to protect their anonymity. One particular man, who ironically enough was named John in the play, stood out amongst the rest. Throughout the course of the show, he slept with Katie's girlfriend multiple times, usually in group sex scenarios, pressuring the playwright into opening up her relationship even though she wasn't comfortable with that. John was also stated to be hooking up with women 20 years his junior, and had a pattern of heaping praise and attention onto his sexual partners before spending the night with them, and then ghosting them shortly thereafter. GameGrumps conspiracy theorists were quick to link John with Dan, with posts about it flooding both the video's comments section and the Rant Grumps subreddit, a schizo forum specifically created for negative discussion about the GameGrumps. In the wake of this newfound attention, Katie privated her upload and deleted her social media accounts. At that time, though, it was too late. The dam had already burst, and a flood of new accusations came fast. Anonymous women went to the Rant Grumps subreddit and alleged similar experiences with Dan. The stories usually went as follows. They met the NSP vocalist when he was in his late 30s, and they were in their early 20s. Most of them were already fans of his work and had first got in contact with him when they messaged the various social media pages for Ninja Sex Party. Dan would then proceed to heap praise and affection on them before they eventually met up and had sex, at which point he would start distancing himself, leaving the women feeling used and hurt. While all of these accusers remained anonymous, some of them included screenshots of text messages in order to prove that they had been in contact with Avidan. The allegations received some attention online, but mostly went overlooked by the internet at large. The majority of onlookers just didn't see it as that big of a deal, even if he was a bit of a sex pest. On multiple occasions in GameGrumps episodes, Dan had made no secret about his love of women and his disinterest in getting tied down to a relationship. Maybe he had more in common with the Danny Sexbang persona than we thought. On top of that, since all of the accusers were self-admittedly consenting adults at the time of their encounters, they compared it to old-school rock stars, who had created entire reputations based on having sex with fans. For his part, NSP's lead singer remained silent on the matter, at least for the time being. But things took a turn a couple years later in March of 2021 when a user known as NotBlarg posted to Rant Grumps on behalf of another anonymous accuser. She told a similar story to the previous women. She was a fan who met Dan online and had been love-bombed until he cut off all contact after they slept together. There was one major difference though. According to her, even though they had hooked up when she was 22, she was only 17 years old when they first came in contact, which would technically mean that she had been groomed. The post included a number of text message screenshots in order to confirm the details, as well as a private video Dan had allegedly sent her in order to prove the sexual nature of his intentions.
So I just got to my room at the resort in Mexico. Girl, look at this jacuzzi tub. Oh, it's got water jets that shoot out of the seats. They got fucking seats. Oh man, 2 seats in fact. Wish you were here to take up that other one and then crawl onto the first one so we could in this. Anyway.
Unlike the previous allegations, this spread like wildfire when it came out. Any accusations involving a popular online influencer and an underage person is bound to start a conversation. And you must also remember that early 2021 was the height of the pandemic lockdown, and a time in which Me Too stories about popular web celebrities were at a record high. Both Dan and GameGrumps became some of the biggest trends on Twitter for a few days, and those who had been spreading conspiracies about the group for years finally felt vindicated in their hatred. Among the numerous voices speaking out was Katie Schwartz, who unprivated her Bad People video and posted an irate message about it on her Instagram story. To be clear, Dan Avidan is a dangerous man and a predator. I won't answer more questions, but there it is, folks. Let my play and my writing speak for itself. #me_too. Another one of the people who decided to throw their hat into the ring was, to the surprise of many, Jontron. He went to Twitter and made a backhanded post reading, "Does this mean we finally get to finish Sonic 06?" referencing a playthrough that had been left incomplete when he abruptly left GameGrumps all those years prior. It had been years since either side had last acknowledged each other, and this seemed to be complete confirmation that they were no longer on good terms. As much as the internet was reveling in the supposed downfall of GameGrumps, though, there were some who began poking holes into the story. One of the major problems came from a screenshot of a text received by the accuser of someone wishing her a happy 18th birthday, seemingly confirming that Dan had been aware she was underage when they first met. There was one problem though. The identity of this message's sender had been edited out, and it later turned out not to be from Dan at all. This threw the larger story into question, since the most damning allegation, that being that Avidan had groomed this teen, hinged on that one detail. With this newfound scrutiny, Notblarg returned to Reddit with a statement posted by yet another third party. According to him, the intention of the original post had never been to accuse Dan of grooming, since both he and the accuser viewed his behavior as, quote, scummy but not illegal. He also addressed the 18th birthday text. I never said it was from Dan. It was there to establish her age. Nothing more, nothing less. This rang hollow to many people who had been following the story, and most viewed it as a desperate backpedal amidst the scrutiny. Dan himself also came out and released a statement around this time, confirming that he had slept with the accuser but flatly denied any wrongdoing. I stand by the fact that any interactions that took place of a sexual nature with the person in question were done so when she was 22 years old, and we were both consenting adults. To claim I engaged in any predatory behavior is simply untrue. I have made mistakes in the past, and I apologize if my actions or words ever made anyone upset, but those mistakes were never ill-intentioned, exploitative, or illegal in any capacity. After this, the situation calmed down as the internet moved on. The reputation of Dan Avidan and the GameGrumps has pretty much completely rebounded from this, and no new accusers have come forward in the years that followed. It's probably safe to assume that Dan learned his lesson about how to interact with his followers. In fact, at the end of a 2022 episode of GameGrumps, he casually made an announcement that spelled the end of his womanizing days.
No, about 4 or 5 months ago, depending on whenever this episode goes up, my fiance Ashley and I got married.
Wow!
Yippee! 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 Yippee!
And that's more or less where things stand today. Now in his late 40s, Dan seems content to settle down and continue working on GameGrumps and Ninja Sex Party for the foreseeable future. Despite some rough times, the channel still receives a healthy and steady view count and uploads on a regular basis, meaning that it should remain a sustainable revenue source as the team has pretty much all hit middle age. Brian has also expanded his musical projects over the years, including releases in both the children and jazz genres. But of course, he still also performs as Ninja Brian for NSP. In conclusion, there are some people who will never be able to accept Dan Avidan as the co-host of GameGrumps even a decade later. But over time, he has become the only name associated with the not-so-grump moniker to hundreds of thousands of people. It's crazy to think that at this point, he's been a part of the channel 10 times longer than John, but some OG fans are still obsessed over the circumstances of his takeover, and latch on to any controversy or conspiracy that might take him down. At the end of the day, I think that despite the endless speculation about GameGrumps, the truth is a lot more benign than people want to believe, although that answer is admittedly not as fun.
Hey, I'm Grump. I'm not so Grump. And we're the Game Grumps.